And if you sign your kid up to this school, it'll be the absolute best public school experience ever, and it won't cost you a single penny.
All you got to do is put your kids in mortar range.
Well, rifle range, actually. All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Sunbon Rift, and I don't have a sad story. I don't have a educational story. I just have a couple of entertaining stories that I hope you will enjoy. So, what I'd like to talk about today is to discuss my time in the Korean DMZ. And how I got to the DMZ is kind of an interesting story there. It was the winter of 2007, December 2007. I had just graduated college and I had a mountain of student debt, and the recession had just began, and I didn't have very many job prospects in the United States. However, my father knew a recruiter in Korea who was looking for a couple of people to go over there and teach English. Now, the Korean government had set up a system where they would bring in foreigners from overseas, pay their airfare, pay their housing, and pay them a decent salary at the time, and go into a public school and teach English there. Because the idea was that native speakers have better intonation, better pronunciation, a better understanding of the culture. I'm not so sure if that's true or not, but in any case, I was just excited to get out of the house and out into the real world, so to speak. And so in April 2008, I packed my bags and flew over to teach in Gyeonggi province, which is the province that surrounds Seoul. So I taught there for about 5 years or so. I have many stories from that time. But the one school that I want to focus on, though, is Daesungdong Elementary School. This school is a special kind of school because it is actually located in the Korean Demilitarized Zone. And the way that I got this job was I just finished my second contract and I was looking for something new, so to speak. And I got this phone call from this recruiter, and he asked me, "Hey, can you bring your passport to this interview?" And I was a little bit confused because in Korea you don't use your passport for like everyday stuff. You use it just to get into the country and to get your alien registration card, which is your kind of like national ID card, right? So I was like, okay, why? And he said, well, it's in the DMZ. I was confused. That DMZ? You mean the one like right next to North Korea? And he said, yeah. And I looked it up, and it turns out that there is an elementary school located smack dab in the middle of the DMZ. So what had happened was from 1950 to 1953, the Korean War occurred. It was the United Nations versus North Korea and China. And in 1953, an armistice was signed. And as part of that armistice, it was agreed that one village from each side would be allowed to exist within the DMZ. The North Korean village is called Kijongdong, and it is allegedly a propaganda village. The Korean soldier in his recording kind of alluded to that village when he was talking about seeing that giant North Korean flag. Well, I took a video of that village and I couldn't really see if it was uninhabited or not. I didn't really like have a telescope or anything to look closely, and I didn't really pay much attention to it, to be honest. But anyways, the South Korean village is called Daesungdong. And Daesungdong is kind of a unique village. Its residents do not have to pay any income tax at all. And on top of that, the villagers are farmers, but they have huge plots of land, which is a big deal in land constrained South Korea. So these guys are pretty rich. The catch is that you have to either have lived there when the Korean armistice was signed, or be a descendant of someone who lived there when the Korean armistice was signed. Oh, and one more perk is that you do not have to be conscripted like all Korean males have to be. The other thing is that there are limitations to to these perks that are given. The biggest one is that the villagers have to be inside their houses at 11 p.m. every day because there is no fence dividing North Korea and South Korea. across the DMZ. Anyways, North Koreans have snuck past the border, and the threat of kidnapping is actually very real there, which is why there's actually a military police contingent in that village there. Anyways, I interviewed there. I liked the school very much, so I accepted the job. And I want to talk about my daily life going to that school there. So generally at 7 a.m., I'd get up every morning, and then I would either catch the school bus or take the car into the DMZ to reach this school here. Classes were about 40 minutes each, and they varied by day. Like one day I'd be teaching third grade, fourth grade. Other days I'd be teaching fifth grade and sixth grade. At lunchtime, lunch would be cooked off-site and brought into the school. And it was a standard Korean lunch fare. If you like bibimbap or spicy food like bulgogi or pajeon, you're set. So after lunch would be the after-school classes, and this is where the real fun starts. Because in the morning, I taught the government curriculum, and let me tell you that the government curriculum was freaking terrible. And to give you an example of that, I remember one of the lessons for fifth grade was called, "Do you know hanbok?" And if that sounds incorrect, that's because it was. The correct thing would be, "Do you know about such and such?" And it was designed for Korean teachers by Korean professors, and they didn't have a native speaker on staff to spot check this sort of thing. So there was error after error after error, and I had to figure out, how do I make this lesson interesting? The after school class was usually, how do I explain this? Once a semester, we would have a kind of a big event where the students would get together and show how they've learned, what vocabulary they've learned in their after school class. And one semester, I remember, was a pop song contest where the kids would practice an English pop song and then they would get up and sing it in front of the entire school. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, just showing these kids that there's a culture outside of Korea, outside of these textbooks here. But in any case, going back to the lesson that I was talking about in the mornings, I generally started my lessons by introducing the topic at hand. Like, for example, they would flip open their textbook, and then I would ask, "Hey, what's this? What's this? What's this?" And then they would answer, and then I would give my rewards. My reward system, I gave them stickers, like 5 stickers as a candy. The class did well enough, we would take like a day off and watch a movie or something. And then I would quiz them, and then usually at the end we'd play a game of some sort. Then at the end of the school, I'd either get onto the school bus or get into my car and drive back. And that was it. It was a fairly easy job. Now, getting to and from school was quite a trip in itself. As you can imagine, driving into the DMZ is a little bit different than driving to the local convenience store. I lived in Munsan, which was about 22 kilometers away from the DMZ. So the commute was like about, 20, 30 minutes by car or so. Generally, if I was going to commute by car, I would drive from Munsan to this big, massive road. It's called Jairo, and it was created so that the South Koreans could rush their military forces north if there is an invasion of some sort. So suffice to say that traffic driving to the school was very light, actually. But anyways, so I drove on Jairo, which means Freedom Road, and then I would reach the reunification bridge, which is the first checkpoint. So I would get my special DMZ ID, reach into my center console, give it to the guy. The guy looks at it, calls his buddy through the walkie-talkie, and his buddy checks and makes sure I'm on the allowed list. And then he confirms it. He hands it back to me and gives me a salute. And then I cross the reunification bridge. Now, the very first thing that you see when you cross the reunification bridge is an overhead gantry. And the gantry doesn't contain direction signs to South Korea. No, it doesn't have any South Korean cities on there. It has North Korean cities. And I will never forget this, but the distance to Pyongyang is 223 kilometers from the reunification bridge, which just kind of underscores what you're getting yourself into when you enter the DMZ. But at that point, I hadn't even entered the DMZ yet. I've entered the civilian restriction zone. I forgot the name. That zone was created so South Korean civilians, or any civilian really, don't get too close to the actual DMZ. So I'm driving down that road there. Almost zero traffic. And as you're driving down that road, you pass underneath this gigantic tank trap. And if you imagine an overpass to nowhere, that pretty much describes the tank trap. And the purpose of that is if the war breaks out, then the South Koreans will dynamite some charges underneath there, and a whole bunch of concrete will fall down and block the road. So, so I'm driving along there. And then eventually the road narrows into 2 lanes. And then you've reached Camp Boniface. And Camp Boniface used to be an American outpost. It is the last spot before the actual DMZ. It's there that you drive up around some barricades there, and then you reach another checkpoint. You hand the guy your identification card. The guy checks with his buddy to make sure you're on the allowed list, and then he flips open the gate that's barricading your way, gives you a salute, and you're on your way. So you pass Camp Boniface, and on the right-hand side, just after that, is a sign that says, "Warning, you are approaching the southern boundary of the DMZ." And then you approach another giant tank trap. This one is so big that the road narrows into 1 lane, and you have to take turns passing oncoming traffic. And then you pass that, and then you see this giant fence. I'd say it's probably 3-4 meters tall. It has a barbed wire at the top, spotlights, and there's this huge clearing on the DMZ side of the fence, so the soldiers can see if any North Koreans are up to no good there. And so you're driving down there, and there's this huge metal pole that's blocking your way, and rain or shine, snow or not, there is a conscript there, and he's manning that gate, and his only job is to push down on that gate so it opens, and he can drive by and give you a salute as you drive by. And so you're driving to the DMZ, and you have your UN flag in the window, because it's important to know which side each vehicle belongs to in the DMZ. So you're driving along there, and what you see is what can only be described as the best nature preserve in all of Korea, and quite possibly the world, actually. There you can see like rare species of birds. I saw a deer a couple of times. It's like South Korea has been so urbanized that this is like the last vestige of what Korea was like before the war and everything. You see forests, and you see the rice paddies. On the top of the hill, you can see some outposts, and you turn left, and it's the road to Daesungdong. Now, I gotta emphasize here that tourists are not allowed to visit Daesungdong. First, because there's really nothing to see there. But second, I imagine that the villagers don't want to be tourist attractions in case. So I can say that I'm one of only a few foreigners who have actually commuted to work there. I'm driving down that road. On both sides are cherry blossom trees, which are super beautiful in the spring. There's a hill there. You drive over that hill, and then as you drive down that hill, you see a couple of things. On the left-hand side is the MP station and this giant South Korean flag. Off in the distance, you see a couple of things. The first thing you see is mountains that are stripped bare of any wood. And the second thing you see are some buildings with practically no signs of life in them. And third, and most important thing that you see is the North Korean flag. These flags have a pretty interesting history behind them because, remember, these are propaganda villages on both South Korea and North Korean sides. And in the 1980s, there was a spout of nationalism because South Korea was under a dictatorship at the time, I guess. So it was decided that they would build I think it was 100-meter tall flag, kind of like a point of national pride and kind of a giant FU to North Korea. And so they built that. Well, North Korea was not to be outdone, and they built their own flagpole, which I believe is 150 meters or 190 meters or so. But the point is that at the time, it was the world's second tallest flagpole. It is now the world's 4th tallest flagpole, but they had to go to an extra special length to make sure that their flag was taller than the South Korean flag because the The South Korean flag and the military station is actually on a hillside, which kind of changes the dynamic somewhat. So the fact that I went to that length just to show the North Koreans who's the boss is, well, kind of funny. So I told you what I saw, and now I'm going to tell you what I heard. And that is North Korean propaganda. And a little bit of background information is that from, I think it was 2012 to 2017, South Korea was governed by a conservative government headed by former president Park Geun-hye, and she happened to be the daughter of a dictator who was in power from the 1960s to the 1980s. And so, as you can imagine, being the daughter of a dictator there, she inherited her father's dislike of North Korea. So, what had happened was North Korea had conducted a nuclear test. And so the South Koreans decided to turn on their propaganda speakers. And they installed these propaganda speakers along Jairo. It was very, very interesting what they were playing on those propaganda speakers. And I'll never forget this. I'm actually pulled over just to confirm it. They were playing the Girls' Generation song, G.
Is that like K-pop?
It is K-pop. And if you type in Girls' Generation G, there's this really annoying chorus in there going, G, 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 baby, baby. It's just like, it was just this kind of soft power, part annoying the North Koreans. But
Psychological
yes, they
warfare.
played K-pop. Yeah, psychological warfare. Sadly, at the time, Baby Shark had not been released yet. So, yeah. Yep. So the North Koreans responded by turning on their loudspeakers full blast. So almost every day I was serenaded by such North Korean hits, such as Song of General Kim Jong-il, Song of General Kim Il-sung, Nice to Meet You. And another one was Whistle. And they also played, Agitprop propaganda, talking about how North Korea is so great and how South Korea is all, how people are suffering in South Korea. And it was just kept going on and on and on. Now, it didn't get so loud that it disrupted the lessons. I would compare it to if you're in an apartment building living some distance from a sports stadium, it was that level of noise. But it was a nice background music, just chilling at the office. Work on my next lesson plan.
North Korean propaganda to chill and study to.
Yes. Oh, that should be a playlist.
Yeah.
Oh, I should talk about the students too. So the student body consisted of 35 students, which meant that the entire student body could pretty much fit on the school bus. Only a couple of the students were actually from the village. And the reason is not limited to this village, but rather all rural villages in Korea and really the developed world. And just that people are not having children anymore. In years past, the school would be full easily, but when I went there's only like 2, maybe 3 students who actually went to that school. So the South Korean government had a problem on their hands. You can't keep a school open just for 2 or 3 kids. So the idea that they came up with was pretty ingenious. What they did was they put out advertisement to the parents of Munsan and Paju City saying, hey, we have this school here. If your child goes to this school, they will get the absolute best education possible. The student-to-teacher ratio will be 5-to-1. They'll get tons of funding, and they'll get the latest technology. And if you sign your kid up to this school, it'll be the absolute best public school experience ever, and it won't cost you a single penny.
All you got to do is put your kids in mortar range.
Well, rifle range, actually. Olaf Seoul is actually in North Korean artillery range. So,
Jesus. I didn't even realize that. That is a little more terrifying than I would be comfortable with.
Yeah, I remember there was back in the 90s, there's this threat by North Korea to turn Seoul into a sea of fire, and there's some panic going on there. I don't know. I just read about this third hand. But the point is, if you're willing to let your kids be next to North Korea every day, yeah, it worked. There is a waiting list of parents waiting to send their kids to this school. And I will disclaim this by stating that everything here is pre-COVID. I have no idea what the situation is in that school post-COVID. So 5 students per grade, mind you, one class per grade, K through 6. And, there's a lot of stuff in the news these days about, how school violence is picking up and things like that. Would you like to hear a story about the worst thing that happened at this school to me?
I would love to.
All right, so there was this kid. Let's call him Minsu. Minsu was a 3rd grader. He was I think it was the son of one of the villagers. And this kid had a problem with impulsion control. I remember I was sitting at the office one day, and it's just as a bit of backstory. Whenever you go to a Korean school, you have to change your shoes from your outdoor shoes to your indoor shoes. And there's little cubbies at the entrance where you can put your shoes and exchange them. So the issue here is that by Korean standards, I have exceptionally large feet. I'm a US size 13, which is practically never sold here. And I guess this kid had a fascination with my shoes. So I remember I was chilling in the office one day, just working on my next lesson plan, and it was recess outside. And the office is facing that big front, that big dirt field or whatever. And I saw Minsu, and he has in his hands something very distinctive. And I have to squint a little bit to make sure that I'm seeing what I think that I'm seeing, but I am correct. It is my shoes. And it looks like he had my shoes in his hand, and he rears back his arm, and he just throws them as hard as he can. And my shoes land on the other side of the field. And at that time that the bell rings to go back to class, I just sat there. I didn't know what to think. Did this kid really just go and throw my outdoor shoes across the field? So I get up, I go outside, and I have to wear my indoor shoes outdoors from now. And then I reached the other end of the field and I confirmed my suspicions. Yes, he had thrown my shoes across the field. And needless to say, a student that does this to a Korean teacher is going to be, they're going to have a very stern talking to say the least. However, Minsu does not speak very good English. And so I get my shoes, put them back in the cubicle, go to the kid's classroom, knock on the door, talk to his teacher, and I let Mr. Kim know that, hey, Minzu did this. Could you just give me a counseling to him not to do this? And Mr. Kim said, yeah, don't worry about it. So it was class time, so I went back to the office. And after class, Minsu enters the office. Mr. Kim follows him. And Minsu is absolutely bawling his eyes out. Like, he's all saying, oh, Sanpo teacher. Oh, 죄송합니다. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I won't do it again. Like, tears are streaming down his cheeks. And on top of that, he reaches in his pocket and he gives me a letter. And this letter, keep in mind that this kid does not write very good English too. So it was in broken English, but it pretty much just said, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. And I just felt I felt a little bit bad for the kid myself. I actually probably still have that letter if I can find it. But I felt a little bit sad about what happened. But needless to say, that kid did not do that ever again. But yeah, he did not do it ever again. He was actually a pretty nice kid. But yeah, that was the extent of bad student behavior at this school. I've experienced far worse at other schools, chairs thrown, desk tipped over, that sort of thing. But this school, you mentioned that your parents are both teachers, right?
Yes.
What did your parents teach, if I might ask?
My mom is an English specialist for 2nd graders, and my dad works as a school principal now, but he did science first for high schoolers.
Okay. So I have to emphasize that this school, the student behavior was any teacher's dream, because when you go into a classroom, generally you expect to see a blank whiteboard. Students sitting in their seats, books out waiting for you. And that's exactly what these kids were doing. Actually, probably the best thing that happened to me at this school with regard to the students, though, was just walking into a classroom a couple of times. And I remember on the board, the fourth graders, they had put this heart sign up, and they said, and in the heart they'd written, "Teacher, we love you." And I was wondering, is there something going on today? Am I supposed to be giving them something? But no, it was just a spontaneous expression of appreciation. That's part of why I chose elementary school over middle school or high school. It's just because the kids, they just have a much better attitude towards learning. It's kind of like a graph. At one end is the kindergartners, where they're super excited to learn a song or do a physical activity or something. At the very end is the sixth graders. And sixth graders, they're too cool for school. They don't care. And I imagine in middle and high school, it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Oh my God. High school behavior, from what my dad has told me, in America at least, unhinged is an understatement.
Yeah, unhinged. Yeah, I could imagine it'd be, your dad would have some pretty interesting stories to tell.
Indeed.
Yes.
The teachers were trying their best, and the students did not care.
I can say that even at the high school level in Korea, I think the term that I heard from other foreign teachers who were teaching middle and high school was the term easy mode. Because South Korea still has a very strong culture of education. It's part of their Confucian heritage or something. You won't do well if you don't go to school and learn hard every day. It's part of why these kids after school, they don't mess around and play video games. They go straight to Hagwon after Hagwon after Hagwon, and then they go home, sleep at 11 p.m., wake up, do it all over again. And it's part of why whenever I ask the question, "What did you do on your weekend?" I usually got either two answers. Number one, I played. Number two, I slept. That was it. Like, I could not get anything else out of these kids. But yeah, I can talk briefly about student culture if you'd like to hear that.
Sure, and also if you could explain what Hagwon is for people that don't know.
Yes. So in a typical South Korean town, you're going to find a couple of things. You're going to find convenience stores. You're going to find PC bongs, that is net cafes where you go in and you pay $1 an hour. You get the latest PC hardware and you can play it to your heart's content. And then there are the hagwons. A hagwon is the Korean word for a private academy, and there are many different kinds of hagwon depending on the subject. There's piano hagwon, there's a math hagwon, violin hagwon, and English hagwons, which also may or may not have a foreigner teacher. So the idea is that every single day of a Korean student's education leads up to something called the Sunung, that is the Korean SAT, which is pretty much your entire life trajectory wrapped up into one day. Like, you could not imagine a test with higher stakes. If you get a good score, you get to go to Korean Harvard, Korean Yale. You get to, your life trajectory goes up and up and up. If you don't get a good score, you go to some other university, and you get to, your life lands pretty much solidly in the middle class there. It's just a compounding sort of thing, and it's actually a very big issue in South Korea. But yes, kids in South Korea have very little gaming time and very much study time compared to American kids. Another difference in the culture is cleaning the school. Korean students will generally clean their own school, and the school is about as clean as effectively as you can imagine from a 10-year-old with a mop and a burning desire to get the heck out of there as soon as possible so you can play more Minecraft on your phone. I've been out of school for so long. Do American students elect a homeroom president?
I've heard about it in movies and stuff. I have not seen it personally in my own schooling.
Okay. Yes, this is a thing, though. Korean students decorate their campaign posters and run for homeroom president. And what homeroom president is, I have no idea. I forgot. But they'll do that, and the students will vote, and whoever's the most popular, becomes homeroom president. I think it's the same thing in Japan, too, with their anime. I remember seeing anime such like that. But anyways, there's a hierarchy. The teacher is the top dog in the classroom. students will stand up and bow to the teacher and say, good morning, teacher, and the student will say the same thing. And the same thing happens at the conclusion of the lesson. The student will bow and say goodbye, students, and the students will bow, and then they'll have break time. That's the three things that come to mind there. I have to say one other thing, though, about the students. It was very, very surreal in April 2018 because I remember I turned on CNN and I saw a couple of things. The first thing that I saw was Kim Jong-un. Second thing I saw was Moon Jae-in. And then I saw two of my students going up there, giving flowers to the dictator of North Korea and the president of South Korea, turn around and pose for a photo op.
Oh my God.
I was just so blown away because, I mean, here was a guy who executed his own uncle, runs a completely repressive dictatorship full of prison camps, has the worst human rights record in the world, and he's just putting his hands on one of my former students and just smiling, and I was like, holy crap, what did I just witness? It's just that kind of vibe you get when you're just downstream of the news, you know. Speaking of being downstream of the news, I gotta say that I got a quote free vacation one day in August 2015. So here's what had happened. There at that southern border fence that I was telling you about, there are regular patrols by South Korean conscripts, right? And one day there was a big explosion, and when the dust had settled, there were two things. The first thing was that a mine had exploded, right? Now, the DMZ is littered with thousands and thousands and thousands of mines. So that fact alone isn't too unusual, but the other unusual factor was where this mine was located. It was primed smack dab next to the South Korean fence, pointed at the South Koreans. So when the dust had settled, it turns out that two South Korean soldiers had lost their legs. And there were some words about this. That was the closest to war that the North and South had been to in a while. And I got a phone call from my head teacher, and he said, "Don't come to school." And I asked why, and he said, "Go turn on the news." So I learned about what had happened to those two soldiers there. Now, I remember what I did this day. I was pretty indifferent, to be honest, because if there was a real threat of war, the only way in and out of the country is either through Gimpo Airport, which is to the west of Seoul, or Incheon Airport, which is on an artificial island also west of Seoul, and that's the main gateway into and out of the country. If there is truly a threat of war, there would be traffic jams on an apocalyptic scale. Like sometimes you'll see stories about Koreans traveling south on Korean Thanksgiving and it takes forever to get anywhere. Imagine that, but 10 times worse. And I figured if I was going to be in that situation, I'd pretty much be screwed. So I might as well go out doing something that I like. Gosh. So to that effect, I took the train down to Ilsan, and I went to a McDonald's, ordered a double quarter pounder. I was loving it, and then spent the rest of the day at the PC Bang playing video games. Now, so suffice to say, North Korea and South Korea did not go to war that day, but the resolution was very interesting because what had happened was North Korea expressed regret that two South Korean soldiers had their legs blown off. They expressed regret. They did not express liability, which is an important difference. So we're saying, yeah, sorry that happened. Sucks. LOL. And that was it.
Damn.
But what was even more interesting was the monument that was constructed. Now, at the end of the Gyeonggi-Jungan subway line is a station called Imjingak Park. That's kind of like the closest description I can think of is a DMZ Disneyland, right? You know, you got the rides, you got You got food, and just it's a place to take your family to spend a nice day, right? So they constructed a memorial there. But the memorial wasn't exactly to the soldiers that were injured. The memorial consisted of a giant foot. Yes, there is a statue of a like a golden foot or something. And the statue name is called the Foot of Peace. and and this is not to degenerate the sacrifices made by these soldiers, honestly. But if I was that soldier and I was looking at that, I would be wondering, what the heck are you guys doing?
Yeah, no, that doesn't seem like a
Why
very
a
good.
foot? I don't know if something was lost in translation or culturally to me, but there wasn't even an English explanation of what the foot represented. That was so bizarre. And to add insult to injury, almost literally, actually, I remember reading a news article about how there's a controversy that these soldiers who had been horribly maimed received about $900 a month from the Korean government. I just felt so bad for them, And I was just thinking about that Korean soldier that you had in your other video. Like, what would have happened to him if he got maimed, But yeah, that was one instance where I felt that my safety might have possibly been threatened. And now I'm going to tell you about another time, and the danger was much more real this time.
I think I remember this one.
So I remember that it was a nice April morning or so, and I decided to arrive at school a little bit early just to take in the fresh morning air, right? So I departed my apartment, arrived at the school. Now, the way that the village is set up is that when you enter the village, to your left is the military police station, to the right is the school, and straight ahead is a unusual structure. And the way I would best describe it is it's called a pagoda. And what it consists of is it's kind of like a raised platform with stairways leading up to the platform. And on top of the stairs, or not on top of the stairs, at the top there is kind of like a Korean style sloped roof. And it's almost completely open. And you saw what I was talking about in that
Yeah,
news
looks
article?
kind of like a gazebo. I think similar thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the closest description I would say is kind of like a raised gazebo, right? So I remember driving up there, and I remember I noticed a sign next to the pagoda. Now, I don't speak Korean very well. However, I do understand when something is being prohibited. Usually, there will be red text, there will be a Korean word conjugation meaning prohibited, do not enter, that sort of thing. There will be like a no sign. And if I had seen any of those, I would have noped right out of there and went back to the school, right? But I didn't see any of those, so I didn't really pay that much attention to it. Now, I parked the car. I got out and I climbed up the stairs, and I noticed that a few of the openings in the pagoda were covered with a plexiglass. And then thinking about it later, I realized that wasn't plexiglass; that was bulletproof glass. Right. So, anyways, I go up there and I chill there for a bit. Take a few photos of the giant flagpole of the Kijangdong. It's a nice day, so I chill there for a few moments. And then I climb back down the stairs, get in my car, drive back up to the school. When I drive back to the school, the atmosphere in the office is that of pandemonium. And I remember that the vice principal was looking at me like I was crazy. What in the heck were you doing? It was that kind of look. And that look was later vocalized by the head teacher. Sanbon, we just caught a call from the military police office, did you go out to that Padoga? And I said, yes. And he said, did you take photos of North Korea? And I said, yes. And he said, what in the heck were you doing? And he said, you are in rifle shot. And then he mimed a rifle and then, and then it dawned on me. I was like, oh my God. And if you measure that point on the map, it's actually only about 400 meters or so from the actual North Korean border, which is well within rifle range, AK-47 range, so to speak. So he was correct on that part. And then he said, you took photos of North Korea? Delete all photos of North Korea. And, and he said, if you want to go to the Padoga, you need to apply in advance for a military escort so they can protect you. It's dangerous out there. And I was stunned, to be honest, because when I first accepted this job, there really weren't any ground rules on what I could or could not do. Really, I like to think that I have a little bit of common sense, and I can imagine that if I had actually charged across the unguarded border into North Korea, yeah, there would be some pretty unhappy people. But yeah, I like to think that I have a little bit of common sense, but they did not. They never told me, do not go to that area without an escort. Like, I didn't even have an escort going to the school or back, you know? But anyways, so I deleted the photos, and I never went back to the Padoga like ever again. It was a very interesting experience, and quite frankly, it was the closest I've ever been to being shot, or later I learned possibly kidnapped. You heard about stories about American tourists who end up getting arrested in North Korea, like that Otto Warmbier guy who stole like a poster or something, and well, allegedly stole a poster and then got sent back to the U.S. in a catatonic state. Or Matthew Todd Miller, who tore up his visa when he arrived at the airport and said, I want to defect to North Korea. The North Koreans were like, why are you really here? The North Koreans have been known to sneak across the border and talk to the South Koreans, the farmers there, which is a big reason why the South Korean farmers have escorts whenever they do the harvesting, whatever. So that's part of why there's a curfew there every evening to make sure that nobody gets kidnapped. So yeah, at the time I didn't realize it, but yeah, there are some pretty heavy ramifications there. I seem to remember there was this, if you look at a map of North Korea, you'll notice that there's kind of like a little wedge in the southeastern corner of the country. That wedge is the Kumgangsan tourist region, and that actually used to be open to South Koreans. South Koreans could visit North Korea and visit that resort, but those tours came to an end. Do you know why? Because, as it turns out, there was a South Korean tourist who allegedly ventured a little bit too far into a restricted military zone, and she was shot dead on the spot. And again, the North never apologized for that. And as a result, the South Koreans pulled out, and the resort's been decrepit ever since, So, I mean, I don't like to think about ramifications of what might have happened had anything unusual happened that morning, but I can imagine it would have caused an international incident at the very least, Oh, yes, one more thing. If you look at a Google map or even Bing maps of the border zone, you'll notice that there is a suspicious lack of information on the South Korean side. That is by design. There are laws about that sort of thing, about providing detailed mapping locations to the enemy. So I later looked up that spot on OpenStreetMaps, and it turns out that there was like someone had actually added how do you say, like a legend, denoting that spot and only that spot as a restricted military zone in the entire Daesongdong village. So
The Padoga where you went, or
I don't know.
the place where you went.
Yes, the place where I went. So, um, Yeah, that was just an interesting footnote there. So I'm going to let the students speak for themselves. One summer, the uh, local telecom company came up to the DMZ and they shot a film with some of the students. And the topic of that film was reunification. And reunification isn't just about erasing a line, it's about accepting the people on the other side of that line. And it's a role play about what hypothetically would happen if a North Korean defector kid would show up one day and become part of a South Korean class. It's a short video, about 6 minutes or so. They actually burned CDs and mailed this to each country at the UN as a expression of their wish of reunification. So it's a very insightful clip. I'd go check it out.
Yeah, I'll put that in the description. So if you want to see some of the students, then go check that out.
Right. Yeah, I was sitting here and thinking about it, and then I realized that a lot of these kids have actually been on international media already. So a couple of people have asked me my thoughts on reunification, and believe me, I hope one day that the DMZ will become a peace park, a nature reserve where you can visit and see what it once was like, kind of like a green belt of Korea. I think reunification is going to be a very difficult task. There is a very interesting book written by a North Korean defector. His name is Jang Jin-sung. It's called Dear Leader, My Escape from North Korea. And this guy was actually one of Kim Jong-il's right-hand man, so to speak, like one of his inner circle. And in his book, he details the North Korean response to peace overtures. And the way that North Korea responds to that is not one of, oh, hey, thank you. Maybe the South Koreans and Americans aren't so bad after all. It's more to the effect of, thank you. This bag of rice will greatly enrich our upper class in the capital. The way that they refer to foreign aid coming into North Korea isn't foreign aid. It's spoils of war. This guy was talking about how North Korea was like on the brink of, well, let's say radical change back in the 2000s before the South Koreans decided to gift him unconditional aid. And the unconditional aid had the effect of entrenching the North Korean regime. So the North Korean regime is not going to be going anywhere. The South Koreans there's a lot of bad blood between these two nations. And until a lot of outstanding issues are resolved, South Korea will just have to keep on enduring being a virtual island. It's easy to forget how close Pyongyang is from Seoul, but I really do hope that one day I can visit Korea again and do the 2.5-hour drive from Seoul to Pyongyang.
Tell me a story, I want to hear it. You might think it's boring, but I'm interested. Tell me a story, I want to hear it. You might think it's boring, but I'm interested.